And a good morning to you once more, Lagos. You're tuned in and listening to Smooth Breakfast on Smooth 98.1. Right now, it is time for detailed newspaper analysis inside of Freshly Pressed. And joining Valentine and myself in this morning, we have got Fred Allison, who's also known on Twitter as Mr. FB Allison. Good morning, Fred.
Good morning, Lagos.
Happy New Year's Eve.
Yes.
There you go. We're just on the cusp of something even greater.
Yes.
But as we jump into conversation this morning, whether it's that you want to comment on this morning stories or just join in the general discussion, please do send us WhatsApp messages to this number.
Send it to 0809 444 0981. That's 0809 444 0981. You can also send it through Twitter at Smooth981FM. Use the hashtag FreshlyPressed981.
All right, our first story is rather interesting. It is a story of what was lost has now been repaired, or what was damaged, I guess. Navy warship Thunder resumes patrol after 2 years of grounding, a feat that the Nigerian Navy is quite happy with, as they say that the NNS Thunder, that there is no one in the maritime domain that does not know the proficiency and capability of the NNS Thunder at sea. It's a big asset, and it strikes fear in the hearts of criminal elements. Fred, your thoughts on this, looking at sort of this revival of necessary equipment, I guess, for our Navy? What are your thoughts?
Of course, the Navy is part of the security that watches over the channels, the water channels. That, crude sales is one of the things we highly depend on as a country. So the security of the channels is a thing that we really take as a priority.
Yes.
So having an asset back on course that can actually watch over there. One of the things I'm taking from this, because they said it can see a lot of things that's happening in the waters. It probably has radars, and so it can detect activities further along. So this is a good thing for the Navy. The other thing that's stated in the article is that they're making plans to be able to locally, because one of the issues was being able to get parts, to be able to locally manufacture parts here. I don't know how soon that's going to work, but if you just get spare parts or extra parts would be better.
Exactly.
Just be better prepared.
Exactly. That makes perfect sense, especially considering that earlier this year, we had a number of announcements of piracy attacks that were going on in the Gulf of Guinea, which is quite near us. And I know that we've been wondering what they were doing towards that. So it's nice to see this sort of progress in that direction. Up next, though, from the Premium Times, maybe not so much progress, feels as though we're going backwards sometimes. From the Premium Times, 4 Nigerian airlines sanctioned for irregularities. Now, the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority sanctioned 4 different operators for violating some of the civil aviation regulations. They have not mentioned who those operators are specifically, but they are saying that affected operators are to pay fines ranging from 1.5 million to 2 million, because according to the authorities, there were a number of deficiencies, including the non-implementation of training programs for maintenance personnel as required, and irregularities concerning helicopter flight identification, as well as deliberate violation of regulations and performing maintenance program without necessary approval and the use of outdated manuals. Honestly, Fred, when I say anything about maintenance and flight and aviation, it already makes us quite concerned, because we'll never forget the period of aviation disasters we had in this country, where for 3 months it was about 3 planes that went down, and it was a frightening time. And relatively recently this year as well, we've seen a few, maybe not quite scares, but it has felt quite scary to anyone who was on board planes, that whether they had smoking issues, whether there was a depressurization issue within the cabin, whether the door popped off on landing. I forgot that happened as well this year. What are your thoughts on this?
Of course, when the regulating body takes this kind of step, we encourage this, like this as a welcome thing, because they're taking maintenance, as you said, more seriously, or they're being proactive, with their steps to make sure that we don't have this kind of scares or further, like, more damaging scare or activities or incidences, of course. So this is welcome. It's good they didn't actually name the
operators.
The operators, because as you said, we're still a young aviation sector, and we're still trying to find our feet. And as a people, we're very frightened with air flights and air travel. You know, so
it would do a lot of damage to the operators.
It would.
If we knew exactly what.
And our psyche, you know, we already feel we're not as confident about maintenance of our aircrafts and our air, you know, the airlines, you know. So this is a good thing to actually be proactive with it, but also, you know, watch how you deal with it.
All right. Thank you very, very much for that. We've got messages coming in already. Do keep sending them in. Tonya from Angodo actually says, good morning, everyone. Wishing you a prosperous new year in advance. But for all the talk about this SSS Thunder, if it was such an amazing tool for use in the fight against criminal elements, how come it was ever allowed to be grounded for 2 years in the first place? I am not perturbed, he says. But I mean, you type that in caps and bold like there isn't an explanation. The explanation being that, well, a lot wasn't invested in a lot of our military infrastructure for a while. So there you go. We move on now, though this next story is rather fascinating. The mentioning of Aliko Dangote as part of the APC's presidential campaign committee. The headline reads, Why Dangote was dropped as Buhari's campaign advisor, according to The Guardian. Well, it seems that there was a bit of a protest from my uncle, Dangote, as I like to refer to him as, but from Alhaji Aliko Dangote, Africa's richest man. There's a bit of a protest that his name was included in President Muhammad Buhari's presidential campaign council, and so almost as quickly as the name was added, it was sort of removed. Apologies were put out, a statement was put out, apologies were made, and it does raise a number of questions. The first being, was it completely against his will? Was it just included without his knowledge, which it would seem to be, but also what it meant to have such a powerful business mogul seem to be aligned with one political party. I mean, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, of course. He's a businessman. He's never publicly stated. He's not even a carrying member,
Absolutely.
of APC. So he's a businessman, and he's a global business figure too. You know, so and politics and business in Africa, it's a dicey place to be. You know, so he has to, and he also says he's a member of the peace committee, so he has to be neutral. And it's in the current situation that we're in now, with all the the uncertainty and all the I don't want to call it like the hot topic around politics.
But it is a very hot button issue at the moment. 2019.
Exactly. You don't want to be, you know, with all your businesses that are affected, they're across the globe, and, you know, investors and partners are across the globe. You don't want to be in a place where you're putting your investors at risk, you know. So even if it was his intention, it's not a good place to stand, right? The other thing, it also states in the article that he kind of is like a silent protest, so he couldn't actually just come out and say, look, I'm not part of this, you know. Which is also smart of him to, you know, because, as I said, his business has to transcend any president.
Besides, adding him to the advisory committee as a businessman, wouldn't his first interest be to know how much he'll get out of being involved?
Yeah, but it's better if he's being added to like the economic team. You know, once you're in, this is our outlook on what we want to do next year.
As opposed to a campaign council.
Yes, as a campaign, like what does that do for him as a businessman?
And something else we should note is that even within the article, Executive Director for Civil Society Legislative Advocacy does point out something that a lot of us were thinking. But, you know, yes, on the one side, if the incumbent does go into power because his name was mentioned there, that could be great for him. It means perhaps a continuation of a number of high-value projects, which we know about that are in the press. But on the other hand, if opposition wins, that's already, do you feel, rather, that could be an issue, the fact that his name has been mentioned, whether or not it was with his permission?
I think that Dangote transcends like any presidential term, and he has been in relationship with people beyond today, you know, so people can attest to different things that he's probably done or positions he's taken. So one single thing wouldn't put him, you know, completely
in a
at
precarious
risk.
Yes. All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much for that. Up next, Benue and Taraba government offer amnesty to criminals, according to the Premium Times. So we know that there are several amnesty programs running in the country. Well, here's another to add to that list. Governor Samuel Ortom of Benue and Darius Ishaku of Taraba have resolved to grant amnesty to criminals operating along the border of the states. They say, listen, whoever is willing to surrender, including those that defaulted in the past, you're free to contact any of us, whether it's governors, traditional rulers, security agencies, and elections around the corner. And we would like to do this between now and end of January so that we can secure our places and synergize for peaceful elections. What are your thoughts on this before I ask some further questions?
So let me speak on the good and the bad.
Okay.
So the bad is like, it seems like we keep encouraging criminals to go the route of being criminals, and that gives them like the route to the top. You know,
because if every time I pick up arms, I'm going to be offered virtually money and jobs where I wouldn't have been before,
and I get visibility, and I get to see the people that would never have even looked at me or even known that existed.
Yes.
The good about this is that you actually, if you really want to reform, you really want to give people a second chance. Like, this is a good thing, you know, get them, come in, you know, you reform them, they start this whole new journey, you know, and they're now part of civil society. But the other thing there is that you're also kind of putting a mark in the sand. Okay, we've put this thing out there now. You didn't show up and say that, okay, I want to be peaceful, I want to be part of it. Exactly. Then now you become an enemy to the state, and then they go all out and try and eliminate you if you bring up your head in regards to any trouble going up. And as it states in the article, and you said, the elections are coming up pretty soon.
Yes.
And that's a hotbed where this kinds of members of society, you know, would be running range and would have a lot of power, you know, to be able to do whatever they want to do, or be used actually.
Yes, or to be used. Thank you very much. I think you've covered that sufficiently. I won't ask any further questions in that direction. You know, except for the one. I mean, this story has come out now, but it's a very short space of time between now and January. In fact, it's tomorrow. So even if this was put out in the last 2 weeks, which it wasn't necessarily. I mean, is there any real chance of this actually succeeding or working? What possible framework could be put in place to ensure this is happening? Or conversely, is some more sinister minded could say this is just amassing a certain type of element in one direction and having control of them?
That's it. If they're genuine in this, you know, in this approach, right?
Okay.
And then it's the timeliness, really, or the timing of this thing just makes it seem like it's a last resort. That they've tried all the
and let's hope that they're also looking out for the citizens, because they said there's been like, you know, the citizens obviously are the ones that are suffering. They are the brunt of this whole, you know, inaction, if they take one action or the other.
All right, let's move on to Punch newspaper for this next story. 2019, still in the news. CUPP demands mental health tests for Buhari, Atiku, and others. The coalition of united political parties on Sunday said that President Muhammadu Buhari and the former Vice President Atiku and all other candidates contesting the 2019 presidential election should be subjected to mental tests. And of course, we know it came with its reactions. They said they really need to present an independent team of experts in the mental health issues to carry out this test. Now, people who reacted included, of course, the APC. The presidency came out to say no, they should start with their candidates, who's former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, that he should be made to go through the public mental health test to let Nigerians know that they're really willing to carry out this, to lead by example. And other political parties also responded to this. The Omowole Sowore, the presidential candidate for Africa Action Congress, said he did not need to undergo any fresh mental health test, that he already has a clean bill of health from one of the best health institutions in the world. What are your thoughts on this?
So global standards is you have to actually go and present that you have a clean bill of health, you know, before you know, take this kind of a role as the president of a country, especially a country like Nigeria. But in regards to mental health tests, although it's been stated that we have 60 million people there have mental, that approximated that 60 million people in Nigeria, or is it 60% or 60 million people, have mental, you know, problems. in Nigeria, right? Mental health issues in Nigeria. So I guess this is just, well, obviously it's not going to stick. No one's going to play for this right now. Like it's too high stake for in the presidency for anyone to give into this. But it's a good thing to look at going. Elections is pretty soon. How do you get to disqualify yourself? And then I guess historically you can state that some of our leaders have actually exuded behaviors that could point to, you know, having maybe some kind of mental, you know. So, anyways, I don't think it's a good thing going forward, you know, but I don't think it's going to pass in this cycle right now.
But their reasons are really interesting, because they said part of the reason why they are making this call is because the president for 4 years hasn't spoken to the media, hasn't deemed it fit to address the media one-on-one, and seeing that they are professional bodies and all the reasons that they stated.
I guess it just doesn't speak to the media in Nigeria like it speaks to the media internationally.
Abroad. Okay. All right, so from Punch, sticking with Punch for this next story, Badeh Alkali's murder meant to hide corruption in the military, and this is according to a report from a Washington-based group, International Strategic Studies Association. They have stated that the death of the former Chief of Air Staff, Air Chief Marshal Alex Badeh, and that of the former Chief of Administration of the Nigerian Army, Major General Idris Alkali, was not mere coincidence. They said they were killed to hide what is described as the pattern of corruption in the current military leadership of the country. What are your thoughts on this? I mean, seeing, if you cast our minds back to the arms probe panel that was led by John O'Day, that was set up by the President, Muhammad Buhari, back in 2017, the investigation was going on up to a point where it started, you know, reviewing the activities or practices, or, you know, certain approvals that were given by previous administrations and certain leaders, and then it seemed to have hit a bridge, and where it stopped and did not continue. So they are casting our minds back on this parts of history and saying that these things, these deaths that have been recorded in the past couple of weeks are not by accident.
Yeah, so obviously one of the high-stake corruption investigation that's going on with this current government is into arms buying by the last government. And a lot of this current military leaders heads were still in government already, obviously. So not saying that they partook in that series of whatever it was, but you know, it's ongoing. And I think what's stated in the article too is that the patterns, obviously, if there are things going on, they don't just disappear. You know, so the systems have never disappeared immediately. So there's allegations, or there's like suggestions that they might still be going on. Those practices still be going on now, and this military officials are aware of that, and those are some of the things that might have come out in a probe or a trial, right? And just getting rid of them, unfortunately, like this, it's like putting that to, you know, killing that, you know. Well,
because we know for the late General Badeh, the EFCC had been probing him over the 3+ billion naira, you know, arms misappropriation fund, really, that was going on, and that now has hit a rock based on his passing.
Exactly. Obviously, and then when you look at the fight against Boko Haram has been the major thing. It's air and land arsenal, and those are the two areas. And this individuals are part of those high profile officers in those areas, you know. So obviously there's more to it. There's a lot more to it. It's unfortunate that this is the direction in which we would go as a solution, or someone would take as a solution to, you know, to put an end to.
If it's proven.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to this next story from New Telegraph. There has this report, a rather worrisome report, on the corpses, 300 corpses that were burnt in Anambra mortuary. In this story, Fred, we are told that over 300 corpses kept in the mortuary in Enugu General Hospital in Anambra State were burnt beyond recognition. They said the fire started at around 3 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, and erased down the building and also burnt the mortuary utility vehicle. Now, relatives of the deceased have been thronging the mortuary, trying to identify the bodies or the what's left of their relatives really that are lying there in the mortuary. And so the story is really disheartening. It's very worrisome. The police has reacted to this. The public relations officer, Mr. Haruna Mohammed, said that the police command had launched an investigation to unravel the cause of the fire. But if it started at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, a lot of questions come up from this. No emergency services. Don't they have an institution like that should have basic firefighting equipment?
Yes. So we are from Lagos. Lagos is like London. So not saying that Anambra is not capable, but obviously, as you said, yeah, these are the weekends that is being revealed. The other thing is that we as Africans, we don't look at the rights for the dead is very important to us, so this is significant that 300 cops, so there are 300.
The rights of the dead, it should be important to everybody around the world. It's a global...
different cultures have different approach, different approaches. Some cultures actually burn their dead, so this so for us we have it's an important right that we need to do. So to the 300 families, it's almost like you deprive them of the ability to do that. But speaking to what you said initially, there are things that the states need to put in place.
Yes.
They need to put this is not just because of this particular incident. Like their citizens at risk. Obviously, they're paying taxes, they're getting returns, they're getting monies from the government, so from the federal government, and these are one of the things you can put in place. And this also encourages investors to come to the state, like Lagos State, for their emergency setup. One of the things that that drives that is because it encourages foreign investors to come to the state.
All right. We've got several messages coming through, so let's quickly get into those before we move on to more stories. Obi Tankinobi says, this criminals thing, brilliant recruitment strategy for election-winning thugs. Shaking my head. We've got more coming still. Jerry says the release of the criminals are for election purposes. The mental and general health test is very necessary for all aspirants to any governmental office in Nigeria, and this is important because it will help us to know if the people leading and stealing this much are actually sane. Interesting, Jerry. Felix Ayawu is also up here sending in comments. He says, I think that PDP should go ahead with public mental health test of their candidate, then others can follow, says Felix. While Bolahon has this message to send in.
Bolahon says, I was shocked when I initially saw Uncle Aliko's name as one of the APC advisory committee members, because in the plus years of our democracy, Uncle Aliko never publicly aligned with any political party. He's bipartisan. He belongs to nobody and belongs to everybody. So APC was only trying to play a fast Yahoo move by making it seem as though Africa's richest uncle and businessman endorses the government, hence an indirect endorsement of the economic policies. Happy New Year in advance, people.
Thank you very much for that, Bola. And Timothy says mental health tests should be side by side the debate publicly, since it's a public office in contention. Supported, Joe.
That's right.
All right.
And Trevor Noah's lapel pin says Lagos is like London. Which London? Osaka London or Lekki?
Right. Livy from Pestac Town says Lagos is like London, so Anambra is like village. Is that not hate speech? Wow, Livy. Wow. Let's carry on though.
Let's carry on with the story from Punch newspaper. Minimum wage. NLC wants governors who diverted bailouts to be probed. So the call is made by the General Secretary of the Nigerian Labour Congress, Peter Ozoeshan. He said that governors who claim to lack the financial capacity to pay the 30,000 naira minimum wage should not be taken seriously, because some of them diverted the bailout funds that were paid to them by the federal government instead of paying the backlog of workers' salaries. He said this in an interview where he made some allusions to how some of these governors have been misappropriating the funds, given an instance for the Paris Club loan refund trenches that started. They said when they asked each NLC chapter to monitor what was going on and also partner with the ICPC, that is the Independent Corrupt Practice and Other Related Offences Commission, to find out where these funds went, that the ICPC came up with a report that said some of the states diverted the funds, that they also have on record one governor who put the state's Paris Club loan refund in a fixed bank account. Some of these allegations, they're also threatening to go on strike January 8th. What are your thoughts, Fred?
I agree with making sure the governors do exactly what it is that they're supposed to do with the funds. Not necessarily that. So I guess the the funds that came in weren't specifically for salary payment.
Yes, but the governors are claiming they lack the funds to pay salaries. Yes.
Yeah, but they probably also have a lot of things in their government that they probably want to say that the funds would cover, right? So salary is one of them. So if you didn't use them for government things, then they should be pro. So
so whatever happened to the deadline that President gave for the salaries, all the backlog of salaries to be paid before Christmas? Whatever happened to that deadline? And is there any consequence to any governor who flouted that? Because it's passed now. Tomorrow is the 1st of January.
I guess, has there been any consequence to a lot of things that have been put out there? You know?
And that is the question.
So I guess we're still working our way, you know, and finding our feet.
Yeah, well, we're laughing, but it's really problematic for people.
No, but the fact that we're speaking about it, it's you know, we have to give ourselves those are small baby steps moving towards, you know,
small
the fact,
victories.
yeah, exactly.
Wow.
The fact
We'll
that
take the small victories.
we're even putting it up and saying that, identifying that this was said and nothing was done, at least someone can hear it, you know, as opposed to when we can't even say anything.
As we prepare to vote, yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
2019. Please get out your PVCs, and if you need to pick them up, please go and pick them up. Just go. You'll be alright, just go. On that note, we've come to the end of Freshly Pressed for this morning. A big thank you to Fred for coming in. We appreciate you, Fred, as we put you through it. And we've got messages to round up with. Felix Anyanwu from Lagos says, December fire service in Anambra. Things happen to open up these governors and their acclaimed achievements, he says. Indeed. Or Darlington from Apapa says, please, they should leave Uncle Aliko alone. These APC guys may be looking for Christmas, New Year bonus. You know, go warm jobs. That's Darlington. And Abdulaziz says, good morning and all the best of 2019 to everyone. In my opinion, the long-term effect of APC name dropping of Folu's uncle, thank you Abdulaziz for recognizing that he's my uncle, is more damaging than helpful, especially given the need to recant. All right. On that note,
it's
we're
not only your
officially
uncle. This one.
Is a collective. No,
it's not your uncle.
He's for everybody and all. Isn't that what Bola wrote? Yes, he's for no one and he's for everyone. We understand.
It's my older brother.
All right.
We love it. Lagos, do stick around. Coming up next, because today is a Monday at 8:15, we will be talking sports inside the locker room. Tega's already here. She's raring to go. You can already start tweeting at her this morning if you want to try yourself. Her handle is @Tega Supreme. Good morning.
Access to loans from H.